if you had to pick 10 albums that changed your life, what would they be? Come join me, GVB, as I explore the albums that shaped who I am today. Let's go. Welcome to Daffodil Road, Boronia, southeast of Melbourne. Picture this, it is 1981. I am all of 3 years old, and then I come across in our house this beautiful album called 1981 Over the Top. Now, this album changed everything about my life, so let me find somewhere I can sit down. Let's have a chat. Now, I'm not actually sure how this album came into our household, whether it was my parents or whether one of my older siblings had this on cassette, but we had it on cassette. It was played a lot, and it's got some pretty amazing music on it, both Australian and international artists. So we have artists like Mental As Anything, Devo, Rick Springfield, Little River Band, Icehouse, Mondo Rock, The Vinyls, Pat Benatar, and of course, which I'll talk about in a second, the wonderful Olivia Newton-John and her brilliant song, Physical. So this album is pretty much the first recollection I have of listening to music and loving music. And honestly, from then on, it just kept going and going and going. This album has been played so many times in our family history. I remember one specific moment when we were visiting my cousins in Queensland, and this album was playing, I think, and me and my siblings and my cousins were all playing a game of, I think, Chasey or something, and the second song on this album is called Louise by Jona Lewie, and all I remember is when we got to the chorus, we were chased around the house by my sister in sort of like a kiss chasey sort of game. So after a couple of years of listening to the cassette of this over and over and over, and particularly on track number 4, I eventually wore the tape out and it got chewed up, and that was the end of that. And we had one very sad GVB. So what did my parents have to do? They had to find me another copy of the song, which eventually turned up on this awesome album, Olivia Newton-John's Physical album, which I got on cassette. And I think throughout my lifetime, I've gone to about 4 of these. But here is the beautiful album. This album became the beginning of my Olivia Newton-John obsession. And to this day, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. This is my all-time favorite album. I became so obsessed with the song Physical that when I was in grade 1, I would have been 6 years old, a friend of mine and myself did an aerobics routine in front of the whole school on stage, and apparently everyone loved it. I wish there was video footage of that stuff, but it was 1984 at the time. Now, I was obsessed with Olivia Newton-John. And here we are at the Boronia Mall. I can't believe this place still looks like it did back in the 80s. Let's have a look inside and we'll get on with this. I cannot believe this mall still looks like it's taken straight out of the 1980s. All the tile work, the roof, everything is literally the same. Almost everything has closed down except for this record store, Sight and Sound, which has been here for as long as I can remember. I used to come to Sight and Sound with my mum quite often, and she would sit me up on the counter where the shop assistant would open up a big ring binder of all the music they could import. I remember going through the titles and trying to choose which one that I wanted to get next, and once I had decided, I would have to wait 2 or 3 months before it would arrive in Australia. But I remember those days where I'd go to the mailbox and there it was, my new cassette that I would listen to on repeat over and over and over. And as you can tell, I am still a pretty big Olivia Newton-John fan. Okay, now that I've put away all the Olivia Newton-John records, let me talk about what happened next. Even though I was pretty much listening to Olivia 24/7, a couple of other albums started to creep in. I would listen to a lot of compilations, one of them being Smash Hits 87, which had songs like Funky Town on it, Kylie Minogue's Locomotion, which was my very first 7-inch single that I ever owned, and Bananarama's I Heard a Rumor. Loved that song and the album Wow. As I moved on, I got obsessed with this album called Electric Youth by Debbie Gibson. Has one of my favorite songs on it called Lost in Your Eyes. And then as we hit towards the end of the 80s, Roxette's Look Sharp album and their subsequent albums after that, Joyride, etc., were brilliant. In grade 6, so 1989, I became a little obsessed with New Kids on the Block, and this album, Hanging Tough, spent a little bit of time on high rotations. Everyone knew that I liked New Kids on the Block because when I had my 12th birthday party, I received 3 cassettes of this album from my friends. We even did a dance in grade 6 on grade 6 camp to You've Got the Right Stuff, Baby. And this here is the 30th anniversary picture disc vinyl, which is pretty great. We hit 1990 and CDs are starting to become a regular thing for most people, and my very first CD that I owned was New Kids on the Block's Step by Step. Now I don't have that anymore, and I bought that 6 months before I owned my first CD player, and by the time I got that CD player, I didn't really like New Kids on the Block anymore and I had moved on a little bit. So my second CD, now this is a vinyl, but my second CD was Beat the Heat 1991. And then my third CD was this one called Nothing Compares to the Hits of 1990, which I also own on vinyl. Now, this album I love to today. I think this is one of the best compilation albums. I love it. If we have a look at the back, we have some great songs like Opposites Attract, Nothing Compares to You, It Must Have Been Love, Spin That Wheel, Bust a Move. Awesome, awesome album. So all was going fine until this baby came along, Madonna's Immaculate Collection, which was the 6th CD that I bought. I don't remember what came after that, but this started a chain reaction to my crazy Madonna fandom. It is 1992. I am 14 years old and Madonna is the biggest music artist around. She finally released her next studio album called Erotica, which was accompanied by Madonna's very controversial book Sex, which I will talk about that in a second. It's no surprise that I am a crazy Madonna fan. If you have looked at my previous vlog, I laid out my entire Madonna collection across this floor. But for me, this album can actually do no wrong. It had 14 tracks. This is unheard of today. This album went for, I think, about 72 or 73 minutes, packed out an entire CD, whereas these days you'd be lucky if you get an album that is 35 to 40 minutes long. It had 6 beautiful singles in Australia from this album, and I have to say, I don't think I realized until well into my adulthood how much this album has impacted me when it comes to my sexuality how people are treated, the injustice, I guess, in the world. And Madonna laid it all bare in this 90s album. When it came to this very famous book, Madonna's sex book, I remember going to Kmart, out of all places, Kmart, when the album was released and seeing these in a glass cabinet. You could actually buy Madonna's sex book at Kmart. Hasn't times changed? Now, I remember my sister was there with me and she said, I'm not buying that for you. So I had to wait until I was well and truly an adult before getting a copy of this. This was a very controversial album for Madonna at the time. She copped a lot of flack for it, but in 1993, she announced a world tour called The Girly Show, which was pretty much the erotica tour. And for the first time, she came to Australia. I had to beg my parents to allow me to go, which I am so thankful that they did. It was the very first concert that I got to go to. We were right near the back of the MCG, but I didn't care. Even though she was this big, I became obsessed with that tour. And I'd have to say that tour has had one of the biggest influences on me as a performer, a director, staging. I think it's a very theatrical and beautiful concert. So I have already recorded a whole bunch of stuff about my Girly Show tour collection, especially the Australian part of my tour collection. So let's have a quick revisit of that. Now this would have to be one of my all-time favorite items. This huge 2 meter by 1.5 meter street poster came into my hands about 3-4 years ago. I couldn't believe it that I could actually buy. Someone still had a street poster that was for sale. So right here on my table is my original. Now I don't have my original framed, I have a replica framed. Strangely enough, if you have a look at my Taylor Swift vlog, you will see me unwrapping this baby, but I'm not going to do it today. I might show you some footage. It's so delicate that I want to keep it in its best and original condition, and I actually really like how pristine the remake is. It's beautiful. Now, let's have a look at some more of my Girly Show items. I drew this back in probably 93, 94, and I haven't drawn for ages, but yeah, I would have been about 16 when I drew that picture. So even when Madonna had pretty much taken over almost all my music listening, I still was listening to some other music that had quite a big impact on my life. So let me put this away and let's keep going. Okay, the year is 1993, and I thought we would come back to Daffodil Road, Boronia, to have a look at where I grew up. So let me turn this camera around. So this house behind me is the family home I grew up in for the first 18 years of my life. It didn't always look like this. It started off as a small 1-story, 11 square home, and then in the 80s my parents extended it to about around a 23 square home, and then in the very early 90s it became this massive 2-story place. 1993, and I'm going to talk about this amazing album, the Violent Femmes album. Now, it did not come out in 1993, it came out in 1982, but my first listen of it was pretty much at this location. And if you have a look up there, just there is my bedroom window that used to blare Madonna music out all the time. Now, the Violent Femmes self-titled album is iconic for a lot of people. Now, I first heard it from my older brother, who at this time had turned 18. He was able to drive us to school. He was in year 12, I was in year 10, and this was one of the albums he used to listen to on the way to school. And all I remember is on this street that I am standing in the middle of, is on the cold winter mornings, I would be pushing the car down this hill as he was trying to get it started. Now, my brother introduced me to some pretty amazing sort of indie music around that time too. For instance, like the Butthole Surfers, the Hard-Ons, Tumbleweed, Spiderbait, all of those were all listened to in the car, but the one I gravitated to the most was the Violent Femmes self-titled album, which has some amazing tracks on it, like Blister in the Sun, which was sort of a year 12 anthem. And yeah, I love this album. And so this has a very special place in my heart. This lovely house was our family home for 18 or so years, and I moved out when I was late 18, 19 years old. The house was sold, and since then I have lived in 12 other places in my adulthood. The one that I'm in now is number 13 of homes that I've lived in. I got to see the Violent Femmes for the first time live in 1999 at the Falls Festival in Lorne. They headlined, and that was on New Year's Eve, and that was such a great event. I enjoyed that a lot. But let's look at what's next. Guess what? A parcel has just arrived, and it's record size, which is the perfect segue to this next album. Let's take a look at what it is. Look what we have here. It is The Sharp, Australian artists, 3 musicians, double bass, vocalists, guitar, and drums. The Sharp were from Melbourne, I think, and I fell in love with them in 1993. So, actually, just looking at this vinyl, it's done on a matte card, which is beautiful. So I haven't seen this before. This is the first time. But yeah, this is the first time their music has been released on vinyl, but I fell in love with the song Talking Sly, which was their second single. So the first single being Love Your Head, which wasn't very popular at all, but their second single EP called Spinosity had Talking Sly and a whole bunch of other songs. And of course, I went on to buy all their singles at the time. They've had 2 major albums, which was This Is the Sharp and Sonic Tripod. I'm going to talk about This Is the Sharp because this is the one that made me fall in love with the Sharp, but I think as a superior album is Sonic Tripod. They also then had a greatest hits album called Single File and a sort of B-sides, rarities CD, which they released to their website and I think on their tours called Skeleton in the Closet, which I have signed as well. I've never seen The Sharp live, despite loving their music. I was underage at the time and pretty much all their gigs were all for over 18s, but I did meet them once. I remember when I was living in Boronia still, catching a bus from Boronia to Southland Shopping Centre, and it took about 2.5 hours to get there. They sort of did the winding sort of trip, and I got them to sign this CD, the Alone With Me single, which was the first single off their album, Sonic Tripod. So that's the only time I have ever met The Sharp, but I just loved their music. It was simple, energetic, and fun. And quite a few years ago, I sold off a lot of my CD collection, but I kept The Sharp, so it just shows how much they have meant to me over the years. Now, they did perform at the Suki Lounge in Belgrave, which is not too far away from where I live a few months ago, but I didn't go to see that either. So I still haven't seen them live, but this album has meant a lot to me. I'm going to go and play it now. The year is 1995. I was 17 years old. I was in my final year of high school. I would, during my school holidays, work for my dad in his leather goods factory, making wallets and handbags. And during that time, I would listen to music, and the radio station that I listened to the most was Triple J. There was a lot of music playing at that time that I adored, including Massive Attack. Foo Fighters had just released their first album, and right at the same time, this epic album called Post by Björk came out, which I absolutely fell in love with the style and the music. There was something about her voice. Now, some people like it, some people don't, but I was just captivated by her belting sound, her unique style in her artistry. Her soundscaping music blew me away, and so this album became a high rotation for me. I went and saw the Post tour at the Melbourne Entertainment Centre, which doesn't exist anymore. Well, the building does, but I think it's now Collingwood's home ground. Oh no, I say rehearsal centre. What do they call it? Where they practice football and things. I'm a music person, clearly. But I went to that tour, which was brilliant. I mean, most people would know the song It's Oh So Quiet, the cover that Björk released from this album. But I think some of my all-time favourite music, including songs like Hyper Ballad and possibly Maybe, come from this beautiful album. I think for me, the first 4 or 5 Björk albums I really adored, and then after that I found her music a little more challenging to get into. Later on in 2000, she released the album Selma Songs, which was the soundtrack to the movie she starred in called Dancer in the Dark, which, if anyone has seen, is absolutely devastating at the end. And just at that moment, and the credits roll, the most beautiful song called A New World plays. And I still, to this day, think of that song as probably my saddest song in my musical taste. And what I love about that song, and pretty much every song on this album, is that Björk managed to incorporate classical orchestral music with electronica, and it had an emotional impact on me as a listener and in my life, and I love this album. I'd certainly put this in one of my top 10 albums of all time. Following the Björk album, a lot of music that I fell in love with in the late 1990s had this electronic, multi-layered soundscape-like music. And it was this Kylie Minogue album, Impossible Princess, that made me fall in love with her. I already liked a few of her songs, including Confide in Me, Where the Wild Roses Grow, but when this album came out, it just showed a whole different artistic side to her that I fell in love. And it came with a beautiful limited edition lenticular CD cover too. I don't know if you can see that, but I almost bought the album just because of this album cover. I loved it. And around about the same time, Madonna released her epic Ray of Light album, which became the soundtrack to my life for the rest of the 1990s pretty much. I would have to say, when it comes to this album by Madonna, this would have to be the most beautiful Madonna album ever. She just worked on Evita. Her voice was top notch. The producers on this, including William Orbit, Maurice de Vries, brought out a whole new side of Madonna that I had never heard before. Songs like Frozen, Ray of Light, Drowned World, Nothing Really Matters. This album is epic, and I listened to it over and over and over and over and over. So the 90s must have been all about lenticular CD releases, so Ray of Light came with this beautiful 3D sort of looking satin cover. Also during the late 1990s, I was heavily involved in musical theatre, which brings me to this next epic album. Okay, I'm going to need to get into costume for this next album, which is my all-time favourite musical called Chess. I was in a production of Chess with Clock Musical Theatre back in 1997. And, oh, hang on, before we keep going, let's make this black and white too. So, like I was saying, in 1997, I was in Clock Musical Theatre's production of Chess, and I fell in love with that music. This album, the concept recording of Chess, came out in 1984. So it was many years later before I got to hear this for the first time. The music is written by the two guys from ABBA, Benny Andersson and Bjorn Ulvaeus, and the lyrics is written by Tim Rice, who you would know from a lot of Disney music. Oh, there is so much about this album that I adore. I think similar to the music I was listening to at the time. Even though this came out in 1984, it cross-genred music from fully orchestrated through to rock pop music. You would know songs like One Night in Bangkok and maybe I Know Him So Well from Chess, but some of the songs that if you do want to ever have a listen to this that you might want to consider that blow my mind are Pity the Child, and also I love the Mountain Duet. So, Chess is a very problematic musical. Pretty much every time it comes on stage in a professional sense in Australia, it is done so badly, and I have pretty much seen every production of Chess since I was in it in 1997, and I keep telling friends to go and see it. It's amazing, and then the productions they see are woeful, absolutely woeful. Honestly, the best production of Chess that I have seen on the professional stage would be the production company's version back in 2012, which was done at the Art Centre, and then even more recently, Clock Musical Theatre did it again, and their production was pretty spectacular. So, Chess as a musical is pretty complex in its story, and I think it's really hard for people to get their head around the character complexities. The show is set during the peak of the US and Russia conflicts, and I think the characters and the storyline are pretty intense and difficult to understand. I think being a part of the show makes you really appreciate the ins and the outs of the characterization, the storyline. But if you're watching it for the first time, it does not surprise me that it is a little complex. What is also great about this show is that oftentimes when it is performed, the orders, similar to a chessboard, doesn't follow the same pattern each time. The music is often placed in different orders on stage, which I kind of like about the show too. So that wraps up the 1990s, and we are just about to head into the year 2000, where I got married. Leading up to the year 2000, the music I was into was getting a little bit darker. My friends and I would go out clubbing, but not your normal doof clubbing. We would go clubbing to alternative nights, for instance, like Goo at the Metro, which was on Thursday nights in Melbourne. And the music that I was getting into were things like Ministry, Filter, and then this album came into my life called The Fragile by Nine Inch Nails. Now, the first time I saw Nine Inch Nails was at a festival called Alternative Nation in 1995, I believe. But when this album came out in 1999, it pretty much solidified my love of this electronic soundscapey music, yet it was a lot more heavier and industrial. So an interesting fact about The Fragile is that it was released on 3 different formats: a double vinyl, double CD, and a double cassette. While that's not particularly that interesting, what was really great is that Trent Reznor, who is Nine Inch Nails basically, put bonus tracks on the vinyl that weren't on the CD, and also a bonus track on the double cassette. So kind of like what Taylor Swift does now. Maybe he started it all. In the year 2000, I was working as a bookbinder. I would restore old books, family heirlooms and Bibles, but I would also make TV and movie props as well. Some that you may know are the Vampire Lestat's diary or journal from the movie The Queen of the Damned, and also in the TV show Spicks and Specks, I made that big Pictionary folder. So that was kind of cool. But also in the year 2000, I got married to my high school girlfriend. So this album was on high rotation during that time. We even considered one of the songs off this album to be our wedding song, which was We're in This Together. But I ended up writing a song for that, but I'll come back to that later. As a bizarre wedding gift from one of my bookbinding friends is this dictionary. I know that seems really odd, but if I open it up inside, he was at the Revolver nightclub and ran into none other but Trent Reznor from Nine Inch Nails, and he wrote us a little wedding message. Best wishes, Trent Reznor, Nin. So yeah, why a dictionary, you ask? Well, apparently that's all he had on him at the time. He was a uni student and this was in his bag, I guess. Like I alluded to before, I was working on my own music at the time, and I did write a song for my wedding, which I put out on this EP. One of the songs also on this EP gained a little bit of attention from Molly Meldrum at the time, and it was put on mp3.com.au as one of his picks for the week, which was kind of cool, but really it never went anywhere, and I really struggle to listen to this. And linking this back to Nine Inch Nails, in 2004 I was also working on more experimental industrial electronic music, and I put out this EP called War, and my friend Chris, who did that, who got the dictionary, also designed the artwork for this. If you listen closely in the background, you can hear some of the music from this EP, but you can probably guess that I don't really play or have this music out to the public. But hey, how about if I get 5 new people signing up to my VIP membership? I promise to show you a live performance from 2000 of me performing one of the songs from this EP, where I had my long black hair, and you can see what I used to do. I may actually regret that decision, but let's continue on. So over the next few years, I was still heavily involved in musical theatre. I was still writing music. I started my own business being a singing teacher, which I called Monster Music because everything was dark. Then later I called it Vocal Foundations and became an Estill Master Trainer. I was still collecting Madonna, and we had 2 beautiful children. But as we headed into 2010 and 2011, something was eating me up inside. Okay, for this next album, we are going to go on a very important road trip. This park and this park bench plays a very big part of my life in 2011. After 11 years of marriage, I came out. About 6 months ago, I made a vlog about this exact moment in my life. So let's have a quick look at the story for that, and then I will show you the album that shaped this experience. Now, this park bench and this tree hold quite a bit of significance. So before I came out, I was married, had been married for 11 years at the time. I had 2 beautiful boys who would have been around about 2 and 4, I think, somewhere around that age. And for many, many years, I had wondered whether my life was meant to be different. I don't know how else to explain it. So I would often come to this park and I would just think and pace and walk. And I would often come to this park bench and I would just sit here and just think about what I wanted to do, what I was going to do. And one day I took the courage and came out to her. I said, I'm gay. And on that same day, laid in this park again, right on this bench, and felt relief like I had never felt before. And so I looked up at this beautiful tree and I took a photo to remind me of the day that I came out. So in 2011, the album that I spent a lot of time listening to that had a deep impact on my life was Birds of Tokyo's self-titled album. This was their 3rd album, but a lot of the stories on this album were quite personal to the lead singer. But for me, this album shaped a lot about this time in my life. So for a lot of people, their coming out album is something like Madonna's Confession on a Dance Floor, Kylie Minogue's Light Years, or something like It's Raining Man. But some of these songs just felt like they were talking directly to me. Songs like Circles, Murmurs, and If This Ship Sinks. The lyrics spoke about going around doing the same thing and then finally making a decision to let go and make a difference. Things like Murmurs felt like everything was being the same, and then this tiny little change in the heart sent me off on this different journey. So I made the decision when I was coming out to only listen to this album and avoid all other music in the early stages of that crazy journey, mainly because I was scared that whatever happened, those songs would be burnt into that situation. But in this instance, I'm so happy it's this album. As an album itself, it's got a great collection of songs, which I wouldn't say any song on this album is lesser than the other. The singer's voice is stunning. The music is intense and heartfelt, almost makes me want to cry. And that's it. So strange being back here. And then 2 years later, I met the man of my dreams, Christopher, and we got married in 2019. And you know what? New relationships bring on new shared musical experiences, and Chris and my life is no different. So let's head back home and continue this journey.
Nice and happy you just got married.
Happy we just got married! Chris and I shared very similar music taste when it comes to people like Shawn Mendes. This album played a big part in our lives. We even went to his concert for this album and kind of felt like the oldest people there. But we love Shawn. Another album that Chris introduced me to was Alanis Morissette's Jagged Little Pill. Even though I knew this album, I didn't know this album until he introduced it to me. Now, if any of you know Chris and I, we are obsessed with musical theatre. We go to a lot of shows. We've been to Broadway 6 times since we've met. In 1 year, on year 2023, we saw 63 shows that year. We haven't been able to top that, but that year was in particular quite crazy. Some of our favourite musicals that we've shared together will be Kinky Boots, Beautiful, Come From Away, Moulin Rouge, and Juliet, Titanic, Fangirls. But on one evening in 2017, we were watching a bootleg performance of Dear Evan Hansen that we had downloaded from the internet. And we fell in love with that musical so much that that night we bought tickets to see the show in New York. We live in Melbourne, in New York, and then the next day and weeks leading up to it, we had to work out how we're going to get there and see it. But you can see here, Dear Evan Hansen, Hoodie, Connor, and this album made us travel to the other side of the world. We were so lucky enough to see Ben Platt play Evan Hansen on Broadway, so I just noticed that this lines up very nicely with my neck. But yes, we fell in love with Ben Platt. Now, Chris and I finally got married in 2019, but we did not have a song for our wedding until we came across this beautiful album by Ben Platt, his first album called Sing to Me Instead. Now, the song In Case You Don't Live Forever became Chris and my song. This album was played to death in our household, and we still play it a lot. We both love it very, very much. Now, by the way, I am getting way too hot. You know when you're a bit bored and you go and search the internet for your name and you're going to see what pops up in the search results? Well, I did that, and strangely enough, my name appeared on IMDb. I was thinking, that is so strange. I don't remember being in any movies, but it was because of a trip Chris and I did in 2019 to see Ben Platt's Sing to Me Instead tour. We were VIPs. I don't know if that works. Anyway, we got a VIP package to see Ben Platt Sing to Me Instead tour at Radio City Hall, and that turned into a Netflix special. One of our friends had tagged us in the IMDb database. Now, part of our VIP package was a meet and greet Q&A session with Ben Platt before the show, and also a photo op. Anyway, I'm hot. What was really interesting about that VIP experience is during the Q&A, he was only going to answer 2 questions from the audience, which had already been pre-chosen, and he wasn't going to talk loud because he was saving his voice for his performance, so he had his assistant answer the questions for him. When we had the photo experience with him, we were also instructed to not speak to him. The show was terrific. Seeing it from the second row at Radio City Hall, what an amazing venue, by the way, was just a truly memorable experience, and this album is to blame for it. I love you. I honestly love you. You're the one that I want. You are the one I want.
Yeah, I'll tell you what I want. What I really, really want.
So tell me what you want. What you really, really want.
I'll tell you what I want. What I really, really want.
So tell me what you want. What you really, really want.
I wanna really, really, really wanna ziggy zig.
Okay, for my final album to share with you is going to be the mesmerizing and beautiful Swan Dream by Jack Colwell. Jack is an Australian singer-songwriter from New South Wales, and I first came across Jack on Twitter, would you believe. He had shared a post that he was 50 days alcohol free, and at that time I was not drinking alcohol, and I was at about day 20 at the time, and I thought I'll just check this guy out, and found out that he was a musician. He runs a community choir, as well as put out some amazing music, including this album, which at that point I went onto my Apple iTunes and listen to it on my walks, and I must admit I listened to it over and over again. I think for a couple of months I listened to this album non-stop. It has some beautiful music on it. So today I was in my lunch break for work and I was scrolling on Instagram and came across a post that said he had passed away just a little bit under a month ago. So I'm devastated actually. I'm really sad to hear that, because I know he was working on a new album and I was looking forward to it. And if you ever listen to this beautiful piece of work, you can hear some of the troubles that this young man who's only 34 has faced. So yes, but this album has played a big part in my life in more recent times, and yeah, I'm really sad today. So like I said, I came across Jack on Twitter, and because I loved his album so much, I reached out to him and asked whether he had any on vinyl, which he did. We exchanged messages back and forward, and eventually he sent me the vinyl. He signed it for me, as well as included his single, which was on beautiful red vinyl, which I absolutely love, and also included sticker and a transfer badge. And he was so sweet, and I think I'm going to have a listen to this beautiful album right now to just have a bit of a think of him and just once again enjoy Swan Dream. I'm out on my morning walk this morning listening to Swan Dream for the second time now, and I think yesterday when I was recording the video for the album, I don't think I articulated just how beautiful and talented Jack Colwell is. He is an amazing celloist, pianist, and probably every other instrument under the sun he can probably play. His album Swan Dream is this, I don't even know how to explain it, like this, it's this experience that links from heavy to orchestral to devastating lyrics to the most beautiful songs possible. I think some of the highlights on the album are, for me, is of course the single Don't Cry These Tears, but I love The Sound of Music. That song's probably my favorite. The end song, which is called A Spell, which has Sarah Blasko singing on it, which she also produced the album with Jack. And then there's the pretty intense lyric song called No Mercy, which he released to support Q Life and be an advocate for the LGBTQIA plus community. And I was reading on Instagram yesterday all the condolence messages for and about Jack, and it's devastating that this beautiful 34-year-old has left us. And I didn't know Jack personally at all. I only know him from this one little Twitter post that he put out, but the album had an impact on me 3 years ago, but I have to say right now that impact has tenfold. So beautiful. Well, there you have it. I have a pile of 20 albums here that I need to get down to 10, like I promised in the description. But before that, I want to say thank you for coming along this journey with me. I hope you've liked this video. If you have, click like, and you can also subscribe to this channel for future updates. Maybe even go back and watch some of my old videos. I've left the ones related to this one in the description for you. Also in the description is an Apple playlist and a Spotify playlist of what will be my top 10 albums that have shaped my life. If you would like, I also have a membership program where for a very, very cheap price, you get exclusive members only vlogs that I put out almost weekly, and all you need to do is click join next to the subscribe button and you will have access to all my members only vlogs from past and present, and you can cancel anytime, so check it out. As a special tribute to this episode, my husband Chris has gone through and picked his top 10 albums as well. So it's a little bit of a Chris takeover this week. But what I'm going to do is move this table, lay all these vinyls out on the floor, and finally choose the 10. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I got it down to 10, so let's quickly review. 1981, Over the Top, brilliant. Olivia Newton-John's Physical, my all-time favourite album. Number 3, Erotica by Madonna. Number 4, This Is the Sharp by The Sharp. Number 5, Post by Björk. Number 6, the original recording of Chess the Musical. Number 7, Nine Inch Nails album The Fragile. Number 8, Birds of Tokyo's self-titled album. Number 9, Ben Platt, Sing to Me Instead. And to finish off, Jack Colwell's album Swan Dream. Oh, well that's it. Thank you for watching this vlog. I'm GVB. Until next time, mwah.